kenzan has been forced for any reason and it is sort of pressured down, you just need to use your scissors or a sami to lift the pins a little bit. Lift the pins so that you have them quite even. This will help you when you're doing your work to get the material very well on the kenzan. That's your kenzan. This is your secateurs or asami. This is your container. This is a moribana container. We're going to do a moribana arrangement. It is commonly called, this type of container is commonly called a suiban, and it is the most popular type of container for doing moribana arrangements. The moribana arrangement simply means that you're going to use a shallow container and a kenzan. So there are many placements of kenzan in container, and I want you to remember them. Position 1 is away from me. Position 2 to my left and away. Position 3 closer to me on the left. Position 4 to my right. Remember, position 1, 2, 3, 4. 5 right down in the center there. 6 across there. 7 nearest to my chin, and 8 in between 4 and 1. Now sometimes you'll see people have a kenzan in the middle of the container. It shouldn't happen. It should be slightly off. In number 5 position or in number 7 position. In Ikebana we never work center unless the container is so made that it is impossible to get it off center. We always work off center. The other thing to remember that it is important to have water in the container before you start to work. So you pour some water in so that when you cut your material, you'll cut it in water, not without water. The water helps to preserve the life of the plant material, and it's very important that the plant material should get water when you cut it and not air. It's very, very important. Today's arrangement, this first arrangement, is going to be basic upright. In basic upright, there are 2 areas that you can place your kenzan. In position 1 or 4. That's not to say you couldn't use 5 or 7, but in teaching, we want you to remember to place your kenzan in position 1 or 4 for basic upright. The business of placement of kenzan to the fore in the number 1 position is usually used in the winter time when one does not need to see too much water. Then it could also be significant, the idea of someone having arrived, someone having traveled, someone having gone overseas. Then there could be also the business of the kenzan in number 4 position, where you see all this beautiful water, and it's very soothing and relaxing in the summertime. So this could be the cause of shifting your kenzan number 1 position to number 4 position. There are also other reasons why you could shift your kenzan. Having decided that you're going to put your kenzan in number 1 or 4 position, whichever one you decide, sometimes when you've done the arrangement, you will find a leaf or a flower tend to rest in the water. That's not acceptable. The flower or leaf can come over the side of the container and what we call break the side of the container. It's quite pretty, quite attractive. So we never fix our kenzan. Remember, you never fix your kenzan with plasticine or anything in any position, because it might become necessary to move this kenzan. Okay, that is the placement of kenzan in container. Let me tell you now about selection of material. You see this lovely dry twig? It can be quite attractive. Quite attractive. You will take your material and you look at it and decide whether this is this is suitable for your shin, or you could take a branch like this and look at it and decide whether you could use a piece of this branch for your shin. And certainly you could. Use your scissors, twist a little when the stem is hard, don't force your scissors, tidy up your stem, cut so that you have a good clean cut, and look at it. This one I've decided to use for my shin. Your first stem is your shin or heaven stem. And the many types, the many measurements, there's 3 sets of measurements actually to guide us into making a proper balance arrangement. I'm tidying up the stem so that you can see and removing the dead branches from it. And you will notice that I'm very fussy about the leaves that are left on. This one is touching, is resting against the stem there, so I will remove it, and you can remove it quite clean by just making sure that you get as close to the stem as possible to remove the leaf. Now I'm going to measure. Having decided this is my furthest tip of this branch, I'm going to measure. You tip the material upside down and you measure from the furthest point, and for a large arrangement your shin or heaven stem should be twice the height, 1, and you judge the other one, 2. Don't be too mean and not be generous with your measurement. And right across the center of this container, 1 and 2. This is just about right for a large arrangement. For a large arrangement. Now for a medium arrangement. Medium, commonly called the standard arrangement, because most people use the medium measurement. You still tip the material upside down against the edge of the container, and for this measurement your shin is 1½ the height plus 1½ the length of the container. I'm not going to cut this because I want to use it some other time. And you will take the scissors to it away from your finger and thumb to the water, wring and cut. For woody stems like this, you're advised to slit up the middle so that it gets the water easily and it sits well on the kenzan. That's for your medium. Your shin should be 1½ height plus 1½ length of container, whatever the shape of the container. For your small arrangement, your shin is the height plus the length of the container, and you would again take it to the water and cut in the water. Remember, not all materials are that sensitive to water, but it's a very good habit to get into, to cut your material in water. Some materials are very delicate and very sensitive, others are not quite so sensitive, but good habits are always better to get into than bad habits. You get into the habit of cutting out of water, then you're going to get into trouble one of these days. So you have for your large, medium and small measurement, for the large arrangement, your shin should be twice the height, 1, and you judge the other one, plus twice the length of the container. I like to go over this so that you get this very, very settled in your mind. Okay, so for medium arrangement, your shin should be 1.5 plus 1.5 the length of the container. For your small arrangement, your shin should be the height plus the length of the container. Do you notice that the shin is the leading stem? It's the first stem. It is very important that you get the measurement of the shin correct, because all the other stems, the soy, which is 3/4, always 3/4 of shin. Whatever the measurement, the soy is always 3/4 of shin. So if you don't get your shin measurement right, you're going to set everything else off. Then for the large arrangement, your hikai is half of soy. For the large arrangement, your hikai is half of soy. For the medium arrangement, remember, your soy is 3/4 of your shin, and your hikai is 3/4 of soy. For the medium arrangement, remember, your hikai is 3/4 of soy. For the small arrangement, your shin is, remember, 1, the height plus the length of the container. Usually we say it's 1 and 1. And your soy, again, 3/4 of your shin, and your hikai, 3/4 of your soy. There is a special little thing to remember, that whenever a flour is used as hikai, it is always half of soy, whatever the measurement. So there are 2 times when hikai is half of soy. When you're doing a large arrangement, and when you're using a flour as hikai. I'm going to, having given you those measurements, your shin, soy, hikai, your large, medium, and small, I'm going to now do basic upright for you. Notice the water level is quite high in the container. It's very important that the water level should be high. And your placement on the kenzan must form a triangle. You will use your hands very firm to get your material on the kenzan. Now the measurement, the placement, the degrees, the visual degrees of these main stems are important. So you will get your shin down on the kenzan very firmly. Notice the grip I have on this material. It must be firm, and it is down on the kenzan over to the 10 or 15 degrees and forward. Slightly forward, because it jumps back at you all the time, so it's slightly forward. Don't worry about these. These are not important. This is important. That tip is important. So that's my shin or heaven stem. After that, I need my soy. The soy is commonly referred to as the man stem, and it is not the male of the species, it is the animal kingdom. So don't get worried about it being a man, or don't let us get fussy about male or female in this at this moment. Let us understand that it is man, the animal kingdom, and I'm removing the excess leaves because we want to see the line of this material. Okay, we want to see the line clearly, and we want to remove all the excess leaves. So this is going to be my soy stem, and I tip it upside down to measure. I measure, and it should be 3/4 of my shin. So I'll hold it up there. Be generous in your measurement, and cut in the water. Down on the kenzan, over to 45 degrees and forward. See, it jumps back, so you have to pressure it with your thumb. Don't be afraid of the kenzan. It's not going to stick. If you put your thumb on the plant material, you won't get damaged by the kenzan. That's my 45 degrees angle. I need to get it a little more severe. Okay, this material, this is what happens when you use such very pliable material. You get your 45 degrees. There you are, my 45 degrees. And for my hikai, I'm going to use another piece of branch. This branch that I'm using is lavender. Lavender. Unfortunately, the flowers have all gone, and if you're looking at this and using these instructions in a tropical climate, you won't get lavender, but you can use bougainvillea. You can use all sorts of other branches, croton, mango. You can also use jasmine, very, very pretty. But today, because I'm making this tape in Canada, in Calgary, I'm using lavender from the garden. Use something from the garden. Down on the Kenzan, over to 75 degrees. Oh, I should have measured for you so that you will see. This is a large arrangement, so this material should be half of your soil. I should have measured. See how you can get into trouble from being carried away by the lovely material. Okay, there you are. Down on the Kenzan, over and forward to 75 degrees. Now, I'm snipping this off because it's getting in the water. 75 degrees. And if you, when you look at this arrangement, you must see triangles. I want you to look at the triangle on the Kenzan. 1, 2, 3. And I want you now to look at the triangle in the placement of the 3 main stems. 1, 2, 3. This particular leaf has to go because it's resting in the water. But watch this now. When you bring it forward into number 1 position, you alleviate that problem, and you no longer need to cut that leaf off. Look again, number 4 position, the leaf is having a little problem. Number 1 position, no problem. We can lighten this by taking off some of the leaves. Remember though, that in your Ikebana, your shin or heaven stem is the lightest and longest stem. Your soy stem should look a little heavier. It should have more leaves, more foliage or something. Or if it's a flowering branch, more flowers, or maybe a flower. And the hikai should be strong. Strong, see, it has much more leaves to it, and it even has a little touch of a past flower. And there we have a little bit of yesterday, today, and some tomorrow coming out, which is something we also look for in Ikebana. Because these, I picked these peonies from the garden, and they're going up a little bit, so no need to use them, okay? Let me use these that are in better condition. This one, much better condition. And you know, I'm going to tell you that it is not important to use a lot of flowers in an arrangement. It is important to place them so that they show off in all their glory. The peonies. Now you notice that the peony is clashing with this leaf here. So this leaf has to go, definitely, so that the peony would come out in all its glory. Now we have there 1 peony rose and a leaf. Never get too anxious to pull all your leaves off thinking that you're not going to use it, because a leaf on a stem can be very, very useful. And there is that lovely presentation of the leaf, the peony's leaf, complementing the flower on the end of the stem. That is use of 1 flower. Use of 2 flowers. You would need to put your flower deep into the arrangement and way at the back so that you have depth in the arrangement. It is important to have depth in your arrangement. And if there's anything interfering with that flower, then remove it so that you can see the beauty of the flower. That is use of 2 flowers in the arrangement. It's resting on my shin. Possibly I could move my shin over a little, or you can move your flower back a little so that it doesn't rest. Things that are resting are signs of a not too healthy situation. People who have to lean on each other, on others, are not really very solid, not very healthy in mind or spirit, or possibly physically healthy. They need someone to lean on. And we want to see through all this material. We want each item to be standing beautifully on its own and looking happy. The flower should look at you and look happy. The flower should not have its head down and looking sad. The flower should smile at you. And that is your basic upright. Your first lesson in Sugetsu Ikebana. Have you got that? Is that quite clear with you? Because I'm now going on to just change two things to show you how we arrive at basic slanting. Each upright has its slanting counterpart, and what we need to do to arrive at the slanting is to change your shin and sai. Your shin and sai changes places, and your shin is now at the 45 degrees looking towards you, and your sai is now at the 10 to 15 degrees looking towards the shin. There you are. Your hikai is in the same position and your flowers are in the same position. It is the shin and sai that has changed places to give you your basic slanting. Also, to finalize that, your kenzan position, the number 2 or 3 placement. See that? Number 2 or 3 placement in the container. All this beautiful water. You should see the reflections that you get in the water when the material shows up in a slanting like this. Very, very pretty. Remember, the flower should talk to you, should seem very, very pleasing, shouldn't look firm and stiff in the arrangement. Don't put your flowers to look as if they're on parade. Let them seem to be happy and smiling. That is your basic slanting. And this is your second lesson. Study it, practice it. Remember, all I did was to change my shin stem to my 45 degrees and my sai stem to the 10 or 15. And the presentation is important. Just make sure that you have not got the back of your leaves looking at you when you do this arrangement. Be sure that you don't have overlapping of leaves. Be sure that you don't have too many little dead branches. I left this on because I thought they were attractive. Okay, that's your basic slanting. Oh, you don't need a whole lot of material to do Ikebana. You just need to know how to use your material very well. You just use, possibly like for this arrangement, this next arrangement, variation number 1, I'm going to use the same material. So that, because it is important that you understand the placement of your main stems rather than use of a whole lot of flowers. It's not important to change the flowers. It's just important to understand the placement of your material. And branches are always there. They're always easy to find. Whether they have foliage on them or not, they're still beautiful. For this arrangement, we could have used roses. Roses are available most times. You can use roses. You can use anthuriums, heliconias, depending on where you are. There are no tropical blooms in the flower shops all over the world, and I, for one, would like you to try using them sometimes. But today, the peonies were in the garden, and this was lovely to use them, really lovely. They're going off, and so if I didn't use them today, that would be a waste of 2 beautiful peonies. So the next lesson, variation number 1, and remember each variation has its upright and slanting. Variation number 1, placement of kenzan in container the suggestion is that the placement of the Kenzan in the container should be 1, 4, 5, or 7. We find that for variation number 1, 5 or 7 are very compatible to this variation. Variation number 1 is the only variation where there's any mention of tilting back. It is the only variation where there's mention of tilting back. Each variation has its peculiarity, and this one is the tilting back of the shin or heaven stem. And again, I'm still using the large measurement because this is only a lesson, and I want you to get in the habit of knowing that you can use the same material when you're doing a practice lesson. Down on the Kenzan, very firmly, and notice over, but the tip should look forward. The tip of this material should look forward. I don't know how pliable this is, but I'd like to get it to look a little bit forward. It is very important in variation number 1 that the tip should look forward. Firm, you hold it firmly between your finger and thumbs, both of them, and you force it to bend in the direction that you want it to bend. If you hear a little crack, that is not important. As long as it does not break all the way through, it is perfectly all right. That's your shin. It is not important to worry about this bend here. That bend is quite attractive. You leave that bend in. Notice that it is this side of the line, the imaginary line. It's this side. The difference between basic upright and variation number 1 is the difference of this. Basic upright, that's the shin. Variation number 1, that's your shin. See the difference? That's important. This variation is commonly called open variation. There's lots of space between the shin and the thigh on the Kenzan in the arrangement. Lots of space. You have to force this. This material is very pliable. It jumps up at you. And again, your hikai on the Kenzan and forward. You notice that I've changed this a little bit. For the basic upright and basic slanting, I was using my hikai that way. In this one, I'm going to use a hikai, just with a little twist. You mightn't even notice the difference. I want to remove this stem now because I want to leave it very clear so you can see the wide open space between the shin and the thigh. Never crowd that space. If you crowd that space, you're going to lose the value of this arrangement. It's commonly called open variation because there's a lot of space between the shin and the thigh. And you will place your flower again. Remember, it's not necessary to have a flower. You can use an attractive leaf, a decorative leaf, and to the back for depth. Always depth. Some time ago, you know, we used to do just two-dimensional arrangements, and then we all figured why it looks a little bit flat at the back. And Mr. Hiroshi introduced the depth, the movement through from the front to the back. I'm very grateful to him for that because I had been teaching three-dimensional, quite naughty, because the school had not sanctioned it, but I felt it was important, and I had been teaching three-dimensional, so I was very delighted when Mr. Hiroshi introduced the three-dimensional into Ikebana. Now that's variation number 1, upright. And you can also, this is the Kenzan position is in number 7. You can have your Kenzan position in number 5. And can you see the difference? I think it's much more attractive in number 5 position. much more attractive. It presents itself to you rather than away from you. And the leaf, this leaf, is now what we call breaking the edge of the container and looking very, very beautiful, I'm sure. You might wonder that I'm working from the back and yet I'm saying it's beautiful. When you have done Ikebana over a period of years, it becomes second nature to you, and you know what you have done by seeing the presentation from where I'm sitting, from the back of it. You can see the placement. You can almost feel what you are seeing. So this is variation number 1, upright. Now just a change of the 2 stems also, the shin and the sai. The sai does what the shin was doing, tilting back 10 to 15 degrees, tilting back, and the shin does what the sai was doing, 45 degrees forward. See that? Open variation. Variation number 1, slanting. The slanting arrangement is commonly used for welcoming. It's commonly called a welcoming arrangement. This material will not bid you welcome. It's very rigid, and so it won't say welcome, but some of the other materials you might get to use will wave when the wind takes it, or with a little twist or a little touch, it will bid you welcome, as they do in the Far East. They don't say come like we do. They use the tip of the fingers to say come. And when the wind takes the shin stem, it should bid you. That's variation number 1. Variation number 2. I'm not going to use branches for variation number 2 because I want to give you a little difference. I want to show you a little bit of difference in the material, use of material. Variation number 2 is commonly called main branch interchange. Placement of the kenzan in the container is position 1 or 4. And I'm going to use some leaves. In this variation, it's nice to use leaves. You get a sort of sculptured arrangement. That's not to say you couldn't use branches, dried branches, flowers, any sort of flower. What you're actually looking for in these lessons is your line and placement. But to give you just a feeling of difference, I'm using flax, New Zealand flax. This is a pink New Zealand flax. In other climates where you haven't got it, sometimes you can import flax, but in some countries you can't import flowers. So you can use, in Jamaica, you could use, or tropical climates, you can use pandanus, dracaena. There's some very beautiful long dracaena tricolor and bicolor. You know, in the dracaena family there are lots of different types of dracaenas, and some of the leaves are very long. There's abundance of pandanus in most tropical countries, and the pandanus is very useful for this arrangement. It makes beautiful arrangement. The pandanus comes in all green, which has a blue haze about it, green and white, with this very heavy serration at the edge, which I would suggest if you're using the green and white, you would trim the serrated edges off. If you trim the serrated edges off, you will notice that the plant material will not last as long as if you leave the serration on. But we're very fortunate. There's another type of pandanus which is actually yellow and green. That is the most popular one because it has no serration and everybody loves to use it. You're going to measure the same way. Tip your material upside down. For a medium, I'm going to do a medium arrangement now just to be difficult. It's 1.5 plus 1.5. You take it to the water and cut. Cut straight across. Cutting straight across helps to hold it on the kenzan. Fold the tips back a little and present it. The shin down on the kenzan, over and forward. And it's just enough, just off center. The tip is what is important, just off center, that tip. The soy, watch carefully now, because the soy is 3/4 of shin. And you're going to hold it up and measure it, approximately 3/4. Take it to the water. Cut right across. Fold it so that it holds on the kenzan. Place it on the kenzan and forward, 75 degrees. This is what makes this arrangement so different. The shin is at 10 to 15 degrees. The soy is at 75 degrees. And the hikai is the one that's going to be at 45 degrees. I'm going to use a flour for hikai. Flour, which should be half, and it is half, and you place it here on the kenzan and over to the 45 degrees. Behave, be nice, don't lean too much. It's nice to use something different, something very distinctive for your hikai in variation number 2, because the hikai can get lost if you're not careful. You can build up so you have to be very, very sure of what you're doing. Make sure that you select something that is distinctive so that you know that is definitely hikai. Or you can roll your leaf to form your hikai, to make it distinctive. Now, if you roll your leaf, remember you must roll a leaf before you measure. You must roll a leaf before you measure. If you cannot measure for the half there and then start to roll, because you're going to get it very, very short. Remember that. It's important to roll your leaf if you're going to use a leaf and measure for the 3/4. It would be 3/4 if I was using a leaf, remember. It would be 3/4 because this is a medium measurement. If the shin was 1.5 height plus 1.5 length, the soy is 3/4 of the shin, and the hikai, if I'm using a leaf or a branch, would need to be 3/4 of soy. Okay? But because I've decided to use a flour, it is half of soy. Remember that. There are 2 times when hikai is half of soy, when you're using a flour or when you're doing a large arrangement. Now I'll show you how you can make 2 leaves from 1. This is the end of the leaf that I selected for my shin. And I'm going to now support my soy stem. It is the stem that is the lowest one that you support first, to make sure that it is attractive there to you. And I will now support my shin. I'll support the shin with another leaf, because the shin looks so lonely up there, doesn't it? And you be sure that you do not make your supporting stem the same length of your soy. It should be shorter than the soy. Notice? It should be shorter than the soy. And this material you can always slit and fit into the end of the stem. I'll show you what I did. I used my fingernail to make a slit in the stem and fit this end into it. And I'm using it behind so that I have lots of depth in the arrangement. Lots of depth. So that you look from the front through to the back. That's my support for my shin. This is the support for my hikai this time. and I'm using it, this flower in the front. The flower should look up, twist, just a twist of the stem so that the flower looks up, not placed like this so that it looks down. It should look up. Twist the stem a little bit so that the flower looks up. Now, here we can use 3 flowers. If we have 3, we can use 3 flowers. One to go slightly to the back there, or slightly to the back here to emphasize that. And I want you to notice that we have triangles. I'm using it here because I want to show you the triangle that we will form with these 3 flowers. It's a shallow triangle. They're not 1, 2, 3, one behind the other. There's a shallow triangle there. But we also have triangles from there to there and back through to this one. And triangles from there to there and there. That's a triangle. It is important that when you've done your placement of your material, you should see triangles all over the place. If you can't find your triangle, something is very wrong with the arrangement. Twist the thing a little bit until you find the triangles, until you get what you're looking for. When you've cut a leaf, take it to the water. Make sure that you give it what I call a good bath so that the leaf stays nice and fresh for you for as long as possible. And that little piece of stem makes a good addition to the arrangement. Remember, this what I did today, and for this arrangement, I showed you that you can make 2 leaves from one. This was the end of the stem, this shin leaf. This piece is the end of the soy leaf. And it makes a good input in the arrangement there. It gives depth, it supplies a certain depth that this flower needed, at this, the hikai needed for the 45 degrees. It has done something right there. It fills in that area. In Ikebana, we never use the term filler, but there are times when you need to add that little extra to an area to give depth and fullness to the area, to make the arrangement look more finished. That is variation number 2, upright. This arrangement is very suitable for church decor. If you're using this arrangement for church decor, you will find that you use masses of leaves, lots more leaves, to make it full. In church decor, they like it full, and sometimes they like it tall. You can go up as tall as the church will allow, the material will allow, and all that. And remember that when you put your shin up tall, your soy has to be longer. The soy is always 3/4 of the shin. There's no change in that. And your hikai, if it's a flower, is half of soy. Because we're talking about tall arrangements, we're definitely talking about large arrangements, which is 2 and 2. So you can use either a flower or a stem or a decorative leaf for your hikai and make it half of your soy. In church arrangements, people like to elaborate, like to sometimes even exaggerate. And all you need to do, please, is not lose the value of your line. The shin tall and stately, the soy down at the 75 degrees, and the hikai at 45 degrees. There's so many things you can use for this arrangement. You can use palms, you can use dried branches, painted or not painted. Dry branches are always attractive with roses, chrysanthemums. Attractive with chrysanthemums and roses because they have so much of their own beautiful foliage. And if you are using dry branches, the foliage on the flower material becomes very, very important. So you are going to select plant material, flowers with beautiful foliage to enhance, to complement the dry material, the dry branches. Dry branches sometimes have such beautiful lines on them, and I know that particularly in England people like to use a lot of dry branches. The crabapple makes a beautiful branch for this sort of arrangement because it has such beautiful lines. The broom makes a beautiful, the Scots broom makes a beautiful foliage or greenery for this variation also. There are lots of things. What you have to do is go out and look for something that will give you the best that you want for this arrangement, whether you're putting it in your home, in an office building, in a hotel, or for church. It is very much used for church. Variation number 2, upright. Now I'm to show you variation number 2, slanting. Variation number 2, slanting, is also very much used in church decor because of the line of it. You have 2 long lines. The long line of shin at 45 degrees coming towards you, and the long line of soy at 75 degrees. So you have the hikai moving towards the shin, and it's very low there. So you have an arrangement that is low in the center. This peony is very heavy on the stem, and it is tilting a little bit too much to the shin. That's fine. Now, all it needs to do is behave nicely and sit there in this off-center material position. That's variation number 2, slanting. When you're doing variation number 2, slanting, sometimes you find it attractive for a centerpiece, and you need to also remember that if you're using it for a centerpiece, you need to remember that the presentation of this flower in the background is very important. It has to be in a neutral position so that you have it not turning its back to people sitting this side of the flower arrangement. In church arrangement, as I said, this particular variation number 2, slanting, is very useful. Very useful because it gives an area where a lot of times people don't understand that in church arrangements you must not obscure any of the things that are important to the church festival, the workings and operation of the church. And the crucifix is very important in the working of the church. The crucifix is very important, and usually something on the altar that is low and long for a variation, like variation number 2 is very suitable for altar arrangements, but you must shift the arrangement a little bit so that it does not obscure or interfere with the full view of the crucifix or any of the other things, the other emblems of the church that is important. You might wonder why I talk so much about church decor, because if you're doing any sort of flower arrangement, you will find people always think that you will be able to do some church decoration, and they will ask you to do church decoration. You have to be sort of prepared for it, because you're going to be asked. They think as long as you're doing flower arrangement, you should be able to do church decoration. And there's no reason. There was once a lady who said that Ikebana came out of a period of paganism, and therefore she didn't think it was suitable for church decor. She's very, very wrong. It is very suitable for church decor. Ikebana first went into the temple in praise of the gods. And whether it is a pagan god or a Christian god, it's not important. Ikebana started in worship, whether it is Christian worship or Buddhist worship or whatever. It started as a form of worship, giving flowers to the gods, and therefore there is no reason why Ikebana cannot be used in a Christian presentation. This is variation number 2, slanting. And you notice I've used the peonies. I've continued to use the peonies. I'm suggesting that you could use roses or chrysanthemums with this arrangement. I would like to suggest that you can also use a combination of flowers. You could have used gladiolas. gladiolus or flowering branches such as any of the flowering currants. You could still use astromerias. They're a little bit bunchy, but there would be no reason why you couldn't use them. You could use delphiniums, the blue delphinium, any of the delphiniums. I noticed delphiniums are coming in shades of blue, and delphiniums or lupins make a lovely, tall, stately statement when it comes to stem material, flowering stem material. And also you could use the lilac when it's in bloom. If some people are allergic to lilac because of the heavy scent, then you will have some consideration for them, won't you? Sometimes we impose our thoughts and ideas on other people without even realizing it. There's some people that are very, very much allergic to highly scented plant material. Be very careful how you use your material when you are using it in other people's homes. And some people really cannot take, I know euphorbia, some people can't handle euphobias, and euphobias such as the Christmas flower, the poinsettia, are so much used at Christmas time. But there's some people who are allergic to it, so be very careful how you use these things. In the tropics we have a white euphorbia, which we use very, very much at Christmas time, along with the red and the pink poinsettias, and it makes a beautiful Christmas decoration, very, very beautiful. There's also such things as ixoras, which is a flowering branch, big heads of ixoras, small heads of ixoras, and when you're using ixoras you can always regulate the size by taking out some of the inflorescence, and they make very beautiful Christmas arrangements. Can be used for variation number 2, slanted or upright, because you can use the stem, the whole branch of the ixora. You can be just careful where you cut and use the branch, and you can remove as much of the inflorescence so as to get the presentation that you want. And you can use this very successfully with the white euphorbia or the poinsettia, because ixoras come in all sorts of colors. Okay, so this is variation number 2, slanting. Number 3, variation number 3, slanting. Variation number 3, slanting is number 3, upright, before we come to the slanting, excuse me. But number 3, upright, has its tremendous peculiarity. The placement of the main stems on the kenzan, very important. The kenzan position is important. Incidentally, I should have told you that in the variation number 2, slanting, the kenzan had changed places to 2 or 3. Now for variation number 3, upright. Variation number 3, upright, looks better. Any of them, upright or slanting, looks better in a compote. It always looks good in a compote. Something happens that causes it to lend itself very well to a compote. But because I want to show you the placement of the kenzan and the placement of the stems on the kenzan, I'm still using the shallow moribana container. And the position of the kenzan is 1, 4, 5, or 7. Variation number 3. I'm going to use broom, Scotch broom, because I think it lends itself very, very well to it. In the tropics, we tend to use anthuriums quite a lot for this arrangement. Anthuriums, birds of paradise, gingers, red or pink, because somehow they seem to lend themselves very, very much to variation number 3. You can turn the flowers so that they talk to each other. This is important. They seem to be talking to each other. And to tip I had bent this material and I want to show you. You bend and twist in the direction that you want in order to get the design that you want. You can also coax the tip into looking up by squeezing and bending in the direction that you want. And this has to be done before you measure. And you measure 1.5 plus 1. Don't straighten it. If you straighten it, you're going to lose. Plus 1.5. I think I could get a large arrangement from this, and because there is more dignity in this sort of material when you do a large arrangement, I'm going to measure for a large. 1 plus 1 and 1 plus 1. Let me do it again. 1 plus 1 and 1, not straightening it out, and 1. And there's just a little bit off, so we'll clip it off. Scotch broom. Very, very attractive for this arrangement. Down on the kenzan, over and forward. Forward, so that I'm getting my 10 or 15 degrees off center. That's my shin. And for my soy, watch the bending. Very firm but gentle. This material bends very, very well. It's unfortunate. We have a sort of broom in Jamaica, but it does not bend quite so well. It's a little brittle. See, it's all the way over, and I'm running it through my hand and twisting it in the direction that I want it to be twisted in to get the presentation that I want from this particular type of material, and coax the tip to look up. This is the soy, and the soy should be 3/4 of the shin. Remember, you should bend and twist before you measure, so that you get correct measurement. Down on the kenzan, I'm going to show you. Down on the kenzan, wait a minute. Over and forward, and it is naturally going forward for you already. This, in variation number 3, the shin and soy are directly opposite to each other on the kenzan, and the hikkai is going to be out front. Put the flower in for the hikkai, the flower for hikkai right out in front, so that the triangle is shin and soy right across from each other, and hikkai out front at 75 degrees. And the first supporting stem is slightly behind it and shorter than it, and presenting itself to you and looking as beautiful as possible. There are other things that you could put in this arrangement to finish it off, make it even more so attractive. And this extra piece could be put in the front or coming through the back. This broom is very, very hard to cut when it is not very fresh. This broom is not very fresh today, and we can just use this broom through the back to just add that little finishing touch to the arrangement. Just let it play among the flowers, but don't let it rest on the flowers. Just play among, just be a little provocative through there. This is the variation number 3, upright. You can support, a little support there, so that it doesn't look too naked. And also a support can be added there to complement the flower there. And remember, you can change your placement of your kenzan to number 5 position. Number 5, number 7, number 1. Very attractive in a compote. It is attractive in the compote because it gets that little extra dignity in the compote. Watch this. Variation number 3, slanting. In variation number 3, slanting, remember that the position of the main stems on the kenzan has never changed. It stays in the same position, the shin and soy opposite to each other and the hikai out front. And what happens is that you just put your shin over to 45 degrees and your soy to 10 or 15, and your hikai remains in the same position. And your supplementary stem or complementary stems, your juices are there, just to finish off the arrangement for you. This is variation number 3, slanting. Now, we come to the last lesson of the first 6. And we're going to do variation number 4. Variation number 4 has no soy. It's just shin and hikai. And you can use any container for this, any one of these containers. You can use masses of leaves for your shin, or I'm going to show you, I'm going to use this dry branch for my shin. And you measure, I'm using this container this time to show you how we would measure in a container that is different from the shallow Ikebana. This is a compote, C-O-M-P-O-T-E. And you measure the same way you did with the material upside down, and you take one and judge the other one, and one right across the outside of the container, one and one. And it is really sometimes annoying that I cut something and it almost is exactly right, and puts people off a little bit, but you get it. This is a dry branch, so you really don't need to get it to water. But I don't want this go flying all over the place, so near the water. Oops. Slit this branch so that it holds on the kenzan properly for you. And it's down on the kenzan, very firm, down on the kenzan, over and forward. This is variation number 4, which only has shin and hikai, no soy. Take off the excess branches that are crossing the lines, because we don't want the branches to cross the line. Shin and hikai. And we come back to our rose of peonies, and it's down on the kenzan and forward. Oops, it is getting very tired. There. You're going to stay, you're going to be nice, down on the kenzan and forward. Now you notice that that leaf is resting on the edge of this container, and there's no way we can shift this leaf, but we can remove the piece that is resting on the edge so as to alleviate that. We can remove that, and we just got rid of the excess. We just got rid of the resting on the edge of the container. Shin and hikai. Shin is 10 to 15 degrees off center, tilting towards you. Hikai, 75 degrees, tilting towards you. Now you might wonder about the kenzan. Where do we have it on the kenzan? We have our shin just here, as we usually do, and the hikai there. We have no soy. The soy would be here. The shin is here and the hikai is there. the soy would be here to make that perfect triangle. Now we have no soy, so we just have shin and hikai. And you can dress this up, you know. You can dress this up as much as you like. You can use things to complement it in the background. You could do that. Or you could use, what we are doing here now is suggesting that you would have what we call a combination shin. And it should not come over this way or this way so that it looks like a soy. It should be very much integrated with the shin, very much integrated with the shin stem. You could also use a fresh branch in the background, integrated with the one that we selected as shin. And you can also complement the hikai with a branch. But there must be no trouble through here. You must not have anything through there that seemed like another stem that is another important stem. These, what we're putting in, are complementary or supplementary stems. And so they must not interfere with the presentation that we have of the shin and the hikai. Everything else we put in this are supplementary stems or complementary stems and should not interfere with the presentation of the shin and hikai. There's just shin and hikai, no soy. So there should be nothing to suggest that this is soy. Nothing at all. Nothing. And there's just one flower stem. Of course you can use lots of other flowers. You can jazz it up by even using another color. Nothing to stop you using another color. Slightly provocative, a carnation through there. And also a carnation in here. Short. Short. Remember, it should be short. Just a complementary or supplementary stem. See that? Variation number 4, upright. Variation number 4, slanting. Using the same material, exactly same material. All you need to do is to move this dried stem from the placement where the place it was on the kenzan, which was here, and put it here. And so it is going to be now directly opposite to the hikai, down on the kenzan, over at 45 degrees and tilting towards you. And you can also put your supplementary or complementary material in the same way we did in the upright. The same way we did. First thing we did was this. No, we did this one, which is not really necessary, but it does look attractive in the background. It adds a lot of depth to it, and this also, which adds depth to it, and this leaf filling in the center area and also adding even more depth. It's very important to have depth in your arrangement. Very, very important. And this also slightly provocative. I would rather think that this would be prettier here for the slanting than in the front of it. It makes a difference, doesn't it, when you, for the upright as it does for the slanting. It makes a little difference to have the flower slightly in the background. Don't be naughty. You always, this is one of the things you do in Ikebana. You talk to your material a little bit, and then you'll be surprised how they react. It's like talking to your children. You talk to your material and they react. They do what you want them to do sometimes, and sometimes they don't. This stem needs a little trimming. Sometimes when the stems have become a little used, they don't sit so well on the kenzan for you, and they give you a little bit of trouble to stay on the kenzan. This carnation. Ah, now it's done the right thing. And this also in the background, finishing off variation number 4, upright, slanting, sorry. Variation number 4, slanting. So this is the end of your first 6 lessons in Sogetsu Ikebana. And when you watch these tapes and you watch them over and over until you get your lines right, get your presentation right, and know what you're about. If you have any problems, watch over and over, see the tilt of the material, and listen very carefully. Second half of the basic series, we start with variation number 5. Variation number 5 comprises any of the previous variations that you've done. Basic upright, basic slanting, variation number 1, 2, 3, 4, upright or slanting. What happens in variation number 5 is that you are doing a divided style. You're dividing the arrangements, the basic designs that you did before, into 2 parts. So you're going to be using 2 kenzans. In basic upright, variation number 5, you will have 1 kenzan in number 1 position and another kenzan in number 3 position, or you will revert it, and 1 kenzan would be in number 4 and the other kenzan in number 2. So you should not have your kenzans opposite to each other anywhere in the container. Now when you're using a round container like this, sometimes it gets a little confusing if you move away from it and you will not exactly know where you place your kenzan. But you sit in front of the straight line up the middle. You sit in front of it and you will soon know exactly which position you've placed the kenzan in. So whichever arrangement you're going to do, whether it is basic upright, basic slanting, variation number 1 upright or slanting, 2 upright or slanting, 3 upright or slanting, 4 upright or slanting, you decide which one you're going to do. You must remember that the center of this container has to be clear. Nothing should lap or overlap to the center. It should be very, very clear, and you should see the water. In some schools, this arrangement is commonly called a fish path arrangement. So people tend to think they see fish swimming from one area to the other. You will do your measurements the same way. It is advisable that you should use a single measurement, a medium measurement, 1.5 plus 1.5, 1.5 plus 1.5. You measure the same way you do with everything else. And I'm going to do a basic upright. And your shin is on the kenzan, right down on the kenzan, tilting forward towards you. Your side is still in the 45 degrees position. I'm using aspidistra leaves, and I think that you will just so you can get an idea of what these leaves look like in this variation. Now this is a bit long for variation number for your soy, but you can, as we told you in the first session, you can always bend your leaves, and for aspidistra leaves, you twirl them at the end like this. Twirl them. Run it through your hand a bit for the warmth of your hand to help to give you the curve that you want. And now we have our 3/4 measurement, down on the kenzan, over and forward at the 45 degrees angle. That's for your basic upright, variation number 5. And for the hikai, I'm going to curl the leaf and press through the center vein of the leaf so that it holds into a very attractive design. And that is my hikai on this kenzan. The shin and soy on that kenzan and the hikai on that kenzan. For the other things you need flowers. You can use flowers, but remember that these are basic teaching lessons, and I really would like you to get your lines clearly. Your shin at the 10 to 15 degrees off center, your soy at your 45 degrees off center, and your hikai 75 degrees coming towards you. Notice that the center line is very clear. And notice where the hikai is, that if it was put together, you would have your triangle there. That is very important to remember. For adding flowers to it, please remember again that you should keep your lines clear, and remember that we always support the ikai area first and then go on to supporting the other areas as we see fit or we so desire. Notice that in placing the flowers are not placed this way. The flowers are placed this way with your shorter flower, your shorter bloom in the back rather than in the front. Most people tend to want to put the shortest bloom in the front, and then you won't get any depth to the arrangement. Your eye should go from the front through to the back and low. You can place flowers lower there, but remember that the center line must not be interfered with. This is slightly in the background so that it takes your eye from the front to the back. And you really don't need a whole lot of flowers in this arrangement, just like everything else. You don't need a lot of flowers in Ikebana arrangement. You just need to place your flowers properly so that you get the best value from them. That is variation number 5, using basic upright. Now what I want to ask you to do is to go through all the variations, sort of slice them down the middle, and decide that you're going to put your shin and soy on one kenzan, your hikai on another. You must remember that there are certain variations where you have to have the tilting back, like in variation number 1. So it would be important, when you go through your lines, you will notice that it is important for you to place your shin in variation number 1. You would need to place your shin this side of the container, your soy that side, so that you get the open variation, and your hikai here. Now you will notice also that you need to shift things about a little bit, and you need to support your soy this side rather than your hikai. This is how you would arrive at variation number 1. And I'm doing this one for you because I want you to see how different it is when you're using the variations, the tilting back of the shin. If you want the tip to look forward, don't forget there are ways of doing it. You coax the tip into looking forward for you, but remember, you won't have the good length of the shin if you have not twisted before you measure. This is how you would arrive at variation number 1. And I did this one because I want to help you out a little bit. You just slice the others down the middle and arrange them, leaving the center clear. That is how you will arrive at your variation number 5. And remember, variation number 5 is one arrangement divided in 2 parts. Don't get confused with any other variation. And remember that you can use any of the previous variations to do this arrangement. And in explaining it, you will say, this is basic upright variation number 5. And anybody will understand that you have done variation number 5 because they will see that you have a divided style. Okay? Now we're going to do variation number 6. For variation number 6 is an all-round arrangement. It should be viewed from any side, any angle. Things that you can use for variation number 6, things like birds of paradise, heliconias, gingers, carnations, roses. You are going to select things compatible to an all-round view. And it's very good when you have flowers with their own foliage, or you have the clean stem of the heliconias or the birds of paradise or the gingers. And anthuriums also lend themselves very well. You couldn't use the aspidistra leaves. It will give you a little bit of problem, let me tell you that. So since we have carnations, I'm going to use these miniature carnations. The placement of the Kenzan in this arrangement should be 5 or 7, and it does look good in a compote. Remember that, the one that lifts off the table with the legs, whether it has 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 legs, it's still a compote. And 5 or 7 position for your Kenzan placement. In variation number 6, remember it is a variation with an all-round view, and therefore you could use things like grasses. A bunch of grasses all tied together would flow beautifully for your shin, and also another bunch for your soy. When we buy these carnations, you know, these miniature carnations, we really get good value from them, because there's so much you can do with them. Tip it upside down as usual, measure your 1.5 plus 1.5. And I want to tell you about carnations. When you're cutting them, you are much better off cutting just below the node there, because you get it sitting nicely on the Kenzan without giving you much trouble. These are a little wispy because they're so delicate, and the heads are always heavy. So just give them that little pressuring to let them do what you want them to do. That one I'm going to select as my shin, and I'm removing this piece so that it lightens the stem. And you don't need a stem that presents itself directly to you. You need a stem that is compatible to an all-round viewing. Soy. This is too short for soy, so I'll select another stem for soy. Soy, take it to water, cut. And soy can be placed there on the Kenzan or there on the Kenzan. Soy, notice that I'm not placing it with the flower looking to you. I'm placing it with the flower in a neutral presentation, because it has to have an all-round view. So soy is very close to shin. It's only 30 or 35 degrees. There's 10 degrees difference between these two stems. 10 to 15 for the shin, 20 to 25 for the soy, and 30 to 35 degrees for the hikai. Tip the hikai upside down and measure. Because this is a flower, it should be half of your soy. So hold it there, measure, get your half, take it to the water and cut. And again, you're going to present it in a neutral position, 30, 35 degrees. When you've done this arrangement, the whole thing, whatever you do, you should be able to turn the whole thing around and see at least one flower looking at you, whichever place you're sitting or standing in. There is nothing to say you couldn't put more flowers in this, and you can always add flowers to the arrangement, whichever way you want to add it, but please don't crowd it too much. And remember that this is an arrangement with an all-round view. Whoops, this one has shifted a little bit. Let us get it back in place. Let us get it back in place. An arrangement with an all-round view compatible to presentation in a living room, a centerpiece, and don't crowd it, but really set yourself out to make it agreeable to anyone that side of the table or whichever side of the table they're seated. Now you'd need to cover your Kenzan, because your Kenzan becomes very obvious in this arrangement. So you can cover your Kenzan with moss a handful of nice clean pebbles, pebbles that you've washed, pebbles that you pick up from the garden or anywhere and wash them. A beautiful stone, lovely piece of driftwood at the base would add a certain atmosphere to this arrangement. Remember, roses are attractive in this arrangement. I want to show you another presentation that you could do for variation number 6. If the material you're using lends itself better to presentation in this position, then by all means use your soy in this position. It is quite acceptable, and your ikai slightly different presentation here. And that's variation number 6, vertical. I notice that it's not being commonly taught nowadays, and I don't understand why, because it's a very useful variation, and I would like you to practice variation number 6, the variation with an all-round presentation. This is variation number 6, vertical. I'm going to show you now variation number 6, horizontal, which is one that is most useful because it's suitable for dining table, coffee table. It's a low arrangement with an all-round view that is extremely useful in the homes. Variation number 6, horizontal. The placement of the kenzan in the container 1, 4, 5, or 7. But you should have an equal presentation of all the material in the arrangement. You will notice also that the placement in the arrangement quite different from anything else you've heard of. The shin, I'm just going to make a single arrangement, a 1-and-1 measurement, 1 + 1. And in this variation, your shin can be anywhere on the kenzan. It depends on how it presents itself to you. Remember, I'm doing this arrangement for you, not for me. And so if this shin presents itself attractive to you where you are, then you will leave the shin there. If it is more attractive this side to you, then you leave it there. It can be placed anywhere. You're just making a nice even placement with your material. It is important that you consider this and you think about it for an all-round presentation, a low arrangement with an all-round presentation. That's your shin. Your soy, as usual, is 3/4 of your shin. This is too short. Remember, don't skimp on your material. If you find that your shin, the material for your soy is too short, then just use something else. You can use branches, you can use leaves, very attractive leaves also. Now watch this, because your soy is the highest point in this arrangement. Your soy is 65 degrees. It's the highest point in this arrangement. And your hikai should be 70 or 75 degrees. And because hikai is a leaf, it can be 3/4 of your soy. I'm using the leaf to give body to this arrangement. And there it is on the kenzan. I want to show you it on the kenzan, what you're looking at. The shin, the soy, and the hikai. The hikai is the one that is at 75 degrees. And the next thing you have to do when you have done this, place these 3 main stems, is to use the center of your arrangement. Fill the center of your arrangement. Put something almost sitting on the kenzan as low as you can in the center of the arrangement. Sometimes these carnations are a little thin, the stems are a little thin for fitting on the kenzan, and you know what to do. You can use shoes, you can put shoes on it. You have been shown how to do shoes. You will cut the stem very sharp at an angle, hold your scissors away from you, because if you don't hold it away from you, you're not going to get a sharp cut. And you can fit it into a stem that is hollow, like a chrysanthemum stem, or here's a peony stem that you can fit it into, slide it into this, and use this as a shoe. Here's your stem on the shoe, filling up the center of the arrangement. Now, because I use the aspidistra leaf for the hikai, I'm going to use another piece of aspidistra leaf to try to fill in the center as well, because it wouldn't do just to have one leaf. And remember that you can coax your leaves into bending, into doing all sorts of little things for you, and so that the one becomes compatible to the other, and you are now filling up. There's nothing to stop you using quite a few flowers in the center of the arrangement. Remember, this is an arrangement that's going to be viewed from above. It's going to be placed on a coffee table, and therefore when you sit with the table below you, you need to see this arrangement with a beautiful all-round presentation. The shin is too high. The shin has to be at 80 to 85 degrees. It must come low. The soy 60 to 65 and the hikai 70 to 75. The leaf here is touching that flower a little bit, so all you have to do is pull it up and place it properly at its 70 to 75 degrees, so you can see this little flower. That is variation number 6, horizontal. And there is nothing to stop you using all sorts of material for this arrangement. You could use vines for this arrangement. Remember that your vine must not rest on the table when you've used it. It should just slightly over the table. You can use roses, chrysanthemums, and very small anthuriums. Very small anthuriums. And the thing to remember is that you have an even placement all around, and wherever you sit viewing this arrangement, you should see a flower. Again, here's a story about covering up the kenzan. The kenzan should be covered, especially in this sort of arrangement, and the best thing to cover it with is a few pebbles, a few stones that you've washed. You must wash your stones, or you get a lot of foreign bodies into the container, and it's not very attractive. Variation number 6, horizontal. Now for variation number 7. Variation number 7 is a very interesting thing. Variation number 7 has many, many ways of executing it. The water is very important in variation number 7. And we don't have to use kenzan in variation number 7. We just use the water and the floating of the flower material. When I was studying my Ikebana, my teacher insisted on me that my water was the shin, or heaven body, and the first thing I put into the container would be my hikai. And because it is important to have heaven and earth, you don't have to have man, you have to have heaven and earth. So therefore, the first thing after the water, the first thing that you put in the arrangement is hikai. And there's certain things that will float beautifully and other things that will not float. But it is very important to fill the container right up to its utmost level, because that is the best way for things to float for you when there's a high water level. I want to tell you that unfortunately, carnations don't float very well. What would float very well is a rose. And a rose, a chrysanthemum, a gerbera, hibiscus, and sometimes if the container is very deep, Any of the euphorbias, like the poinsettia, the Christmas flower, will float nicely for you. Don't try to float a rosebud. It's too heavy, and it will not float nicely. Open up, open rose is the best thing to float. And here's a story that if you have bought expensive standard chrysanthemums and the head snaps off, this is the most beautiful way to use it. The most beautiful way. And to me, it's like a tragedy turned beautiful, because you can do this lovely arrangement with it. When you sit the chrysanthemum on the water with no stem, it rotates, it moves with the wind, and it makes a very soothing arrangement. You see reflections as it moves. You get ripples as it moves. Most times people put the flower that has had an accident, just put it in a brandy glass or put it in a saucer. There's no movement there. So if you put it in a container like this or in a crystal bowl, a wide crystal bowl, you get a fascinating thing, and you find you'll get a lot of pleasure from it. As I said, the carnation will not float, but just for trial, I would open up this carnation very, very much for you. You see, it's too deep between there, and therefore it will not float so readily. See, it tends to tilt to one side. But at this point, since we have no roses, it's important to show you the flower floating. That one flower is my hikai. If I put another flower in it, it can become my soy, if I need a soy. But then I could put a leaf. You would have to take the stem clean off the leaf for the leaf to float nicely too. And you have the shin, the water for your shin. The flower would be your hikai, the leaf would be your soy. And they will float away from each other, and they'll come back together. Remember now, these are not the most compatible things to float, but when you're having a party or anything, it's an excellent conversation piece. If it is an evening party and you put a floating candle on it, remember to light the candle. This makes a fascinating thing, excitement it creates in the house. So this is variation number 7, using a floating arrangement, Ikebana, Ukibana, no kenzan needed for this arrangement. There's also another method of doing your variation number 7, where your material is placed directly on the table just for attraction, and your flowers through it. This is a very, very acceptable form of sugetsu, Ikebana. You put your flowers through the center of the leaf where you've split it, and you let the flowers sit there. See that? You can have this flower that I use sitting in there, and I'm going to show you, just turn it for you, so that wherever you're sitting on the at the table, you will have something attractive. You can use these for individual place settings, or you can do a series of them along the tabletop. When the tabletop is nicely polished and it has a shine, you will soon see the reflections on the table of this simple arrangement. And as I said, you can get as elaborate as you like by extending the same sort of folds, the same sort of thing. You can just carry on with the aspidistra leaf. You can do all sorts of things with this leaf, and get a lot of pleasure out of this variation. We also sometimes use fruit and flowers, fruit and vegetable and flowers, and there is no reason why you can't use this fruit and veg and flowers for a buffet table. You can fill up, you can use a selection of fruit, like a hand of banana and a chrysanthemum, a large chrysanthemum, or a hand, even green bananas can be used, and the green looks always beautiful with white flowers. Green bananas and lilies, beautiful on the table. Remember that green banana stains. So you have to maybe make sure that there's no stain dripping from it and that your tablecloth is not going to be damaged if you're using a tablecloth. Nowadays, a lot of people don't bother with tablecloth for buffet tables, buffet situations. So you can elaborate on this one, or you can use fruit and veg and flowers. Experiment with this, because this is a free-form arrangement and there is nothing to stop you getting on with it. When you're using fruit, try not to use all the same type of fruit. Remember also, don't show the ugly part of it. If your fruit is damaged, be sure that you hide that damaged part of the fruit. Show off the best of the fruit or the vegetables. Don't use all the same designs, the same colors. Try to arrange your fruit and vegetable material arrangement in a line of from green to yellows or reds into browns, because this is a natural movement, a natural way that fruit and vegetable grow, develop, and die. So there you are. Now with your fruit and vegetable or fruit and flowers, you just add your flowers to where it is most compatible. If you're using flowers that will die easily, then you could always wrap the end with a little moist cotton and a piece of foil, and then hide it so that it doesn't show. Hide it. It can either stand among the fruit like this is standing in the leaf, or it can just rest on the table. That is all. It's a very simple thing. But that also is an arrangement that is acceptable very much. It is a part of Soget, and it is one of those that people find very fascinating at a luncheon or a breakfast table. 1 tomato, 1 apple, and 1 rose is very attractive and a great conversation piece. Variation number 7. Now variation number 8. Variation number 8 is a combination of 2 arrangements to make 1. Don't get confused with this. Variation number 8 is a combination of 2 arrangements to make 1. It is not to be confused with variation number 5, which is a divided style, 1 arrangement divided into 2 parts. Variation number 8 is 2 arrangements combined to make 1. And you may use a nagahiri, which is a tall container, and a suiban, where you do a moribana arrangement. Or you could use 2 moribana containers, or you can use 2 nagahiri containers. You can use 2. You can place one on top of the other, or you can place them side by side. And round containers are not so conducive to this arrangement. It would be better if you had squares or rectangular so that you could fit them within each other. So there's nothing to say you can't place them on top of each other, but it would be a little dicey. When you place your kenzan, it can be a little dicey. And you will do 2 arrangements to make 1. And I'm going to show you 2 arrangements in these 2 containers before I show you the nagahiri, because that one also has a lot of to talk about. I'm putting the kenzan position in number 7. You could also put the kenzan one in number 5 and the other one in number 7, because by doing so you will have a better composition. The thing will come together as one much faster for you if you have the kenzan placed so that they can cross into each other. And I'll show you exactly what I mean when I do this. This is shin. I'm going to do variation number basic upright in one, and basic slanting in another. Shin, where's the side? Oops. Side, Remember that soy was a little bit long, so I'm twisting it to make sure that it comes where I want it to be. Soy and hikai. It's a little amusing and entertaining doing this arrangement for you, using the same material over and over. But there's nothing to stop you using different material. This is going to be my shin for this arrangement behind it, and I'm going to do a slanting variation. Shin at 45 degrees. So I have one to make myself, yes. That's too short for soy. This is right for soy. Soy at 10 to 15, moving towards the shin. And hikai. Come on, be good. Hikai. Oh, naughty. Hikai at 75 degrees, because it's a flour, it's half of soy, and the hikai is there, and it gets integrated with the variation in this container. See how they come together and form one arrangement. In variation number 8, you should use at least one of the same material in each of the arrangements. This is going to be my supporting stem, and it's going to be supporting the soy right in there, so that it presents itself to you beautifully. Come on, be nice. I always have to talk to my arrangements sometimes, because they respond to talk, you know. People think you're crazy. Of course, all flower arrangers are a little bit crazy. We're all a little bit wacky, but we get the results and we get the pleasure. There is variation number 8, a composite arrangement. 2 arrangements combined to make one. And here you could introduce a leaf. Make sure the leaf is compatible, and you see how it all comes together nicely? That is what we're looking for in variation number 8. The compatibility of each of the arrangements. 2 arrangements combined to make one. Oh dear, accidents. No perfection in anything that has to do with humans, and this is how we have problems sometimes. Mr. Sufo, the head of the school, said once that even monkeys fall out of trees, so we can expect to have accidents, and I find that very amusing. Mr. Sufo was a very humorous person with a tremendous sense of humor. I used to enjoy working with him. I enjoy working with his son, as I did with his daughter. Excellent people in artistry. Son is extremely artistic, and it's a pleasure to be working with him. That is variation number 8, using basic upright and basic slanting. You can use any of the other variations, combine them together to make one. And you can always, watch this now, you can always do a change about. They must come together at one point. You do a change about, make sure that they're not interfering with each other, and there you still have your variation number 8. You will find that you need a little leaf. You need the leaf in there to make this arrangement look a little more finished. Sometimes you have to change little things, but this is how you know when your variation is very well done. Thank you. Try this, practice it with all sorts of material and all sorts of containers. Have fun, because the whole business of whatever you do in life is to have a certain amount of fun. If you're not enjoying what you're doing, you're wasting time. You're wasting time. You must have pleasure out of whatever it is you do. The nagahiri. This sometimes people shy away from. They say, where's the kenzan? You don't use a kenzan in the nagahiri. You use sticks. And you do what we call fixtures. You can use a stick to place in to make what we call a crossbar, or ichimungi, ichimungi, and you will fit this in as snugly as possible. You have to be able to lift your container by your fixture. This is supposed to be the gentle art of Ikebana, but you will notice it is not as gentle as you would like it to be. Sometimes you have to be very firm in order to get what you want. The crossbar, or ichimungi. The two bars fit very snugly that your container can be lifted by it, even with water. Very snug, very firm. It is important that you learn to do a nagahiri arrangement. It is said that if you have not mastered this particular design, then you have not mastered your ikebana. This is an anchor stick, and this anchor stick can be used for controlling your main stem. There are many ways that you can do fixtures, what we call fixtures for ikebana, for the nagahiri, and we'll slit the anchor stick, and you can fit your material into this anchor stick. You're allowed to wire the material in place. You're allowed to wire. Sometimes you don't really need to wire, but you are allowed to, so that you can control your main stem. And you have control over it by using the anchor stick. But that's not important. You don't really even have to use an anchor stick. What you need to do is to select your material, and don't try to control the material. Let the material work for you. Let the material work for you. Bend your material, fit it into one of these segments of the container that we have separated, and let it present itself through one of these. And each item that you put in there helps to control the rest. Each item helps to control the rest. You have there are lots of things you can do to make this easy for you. So don't go fighting your material. This is one of the unfortunate things that a lot of people do. They try to do something that they can't handle, and then they get into a lot of difficulty. See, this is the shin, and that is the hikai. And all you need to do, see how firm it is? People also sometimes say that you cannot, when you are done a nagahiri, you cannot shift the material. You cannot shift the thing. You certainly can. All you need to do is have your finger, get your finger in between the material so that you hold it firmly before you move it around. And if you want to use flowers, here you can use flowers. Slide the flowers into the same space. Don't try to use all the areas of the space in that you have divided up in the arrangement. Don't do that at all, because if you try to use all the spaces, you're going to end up in a lot of trouble, because it's not going to stay. Variation, no, not variation, nagahiri arrangement, using one camellia branch and one aspidistra leaf. Now, variation number 8, using the nagahiri and a moribana container, using the same sort of material. That is a slanting, and therefore we're going to do an upright in this one. And remember, they have to be compatible. They just have to be compatible, so you're using some of the same material. And this is my shin, My soy, I can use a flower for soy. 3/4 of the shin. Remember, it comes together to form one arrangement, the 45 degrees, my soy, and my hikai. Hikai using the same aspidistra relief, folded, hikai. And you can fill in, oh, this flower is touching, the flower must not touch, and so we have to take something off, and I just as well take the flower off to show you properly. Lighten this a little bit, because since I've taken that flower off, I've made my soy lighter than my shin, and this would never do, so I now have to do something else to follow through and finish off the arrangement. See the compatibility of the two arrangements, the variation number 8 using the nagiri and the moribana arrangement. And notice that I've brought both of them together so that there's no question of them being one arrangement, no question at all. And if you want to try to put them together in a different way, this is what you would get. But you will now you have to admit that it looks better this way. It looks better because of the type of material that's used, and it was originally intended to be done that way. So there you are. This is variation number 8. I showed you how you could do the nagahiri. There are many ways of using fixtures. You will find them in your leaflet, in the pamphlet, the little slip of paper you got, or if you go to if you get some of the things that we are showing around, the little notes that we've given to students, you will be able to follow, and you'll notice that you can use any sort of container to do the nagahiri, and you can use any sort of container. You can use 2 ashtrays in a situation where you don't have a lot of containers. You can easily use 2 ashtrays or 2 bouillon bowls to do your arrangement. Don't become static about buying expensive containers to do your Ikebana arrangement. It's not important. I hope you're going to enjoy your Ikebana. I want you to remember that these are not actual lessons. These sessions are intended for people who are revising, people who want to be reminded about what it is they try to learn in the first classes. People tend not to pay a lot of attention in the first course, and so they lose the value of the basics. The basics are the source of all the other arrangements you're going to do in your Ikebana. However far you get to with Ikebana, the basics are the source. They are very important. Have fun. Bye.